Well, my name is Tolson. I'm retired, but I am a writer. I usually worked away, and so I was just a visitor to Thurloxton once I had left school, and I first went to London, then I did my national service in Germany, and then I got jobs in one or two ship-owning companies, and that's what I did until I retired back to Somerset. I came across the cart in 1994. I had gone to an auction, a farm auction. It was Horsey Farm near Bridgewater. And wandering along the lines of stuff for sale, I saw this cart, which immediately rang a bell with me, because as a boy, we had lived in the village of Thurloxton, and we had lived in the house which had been the wheelwright's house, Jim Porter.
Where it left that, apparently where you can see the tree just poking up over the sloping roof of that house, just behind there he had his workshop, and that's what we've actually built.
My father was the Somerset secretary of the National Farmers Union, and when he had come back from the war, he had got that job and moved down to Taunton. We lived in a house in Taunton, but we wanted to live in the country, and we heard that the cottage, Jim Porter's cottage, Jim Porter had sadly died the year before, it was a Crown property, and we were able to rent it. I'd actually gone to the auction to buy some things for chickens, but seeing this cart with Jim Porter's name on the back and knowing the very place where it was built, the worst thing that can happen at an auction, I wanted to buy it.
From kind of, okay, that's interesting. Oh, it's still got its shafts. Oh, that's interesting. Most of them had them sawn off.
Yes.
And then you show them a photograph and they go, oh! And suddenly, suddenly there's lots of interest because it is in such good condition. And it's just such a lovely thing.
And so the bidding gradually built up, but I stuck in there and I bought it. Next day I had to take it away, and Percy Adams was there. He was 93 and he helped me load it onto the cart. He was the farmer who'd used it all his working life, and he told me the story that as a young man, he would have been 17, he travelled over it's about 7 miles I think from his farm to Jim Porter's workshop, and he brought his horse and they collected the cart that day. So that is the history of the cart. It worked on his farm until 1994, and then I've kept it in a barn since then for what? That's more than 20 years it's been in the barn.
Yeah, so you lived there and it was made there, and it probably travelled this road.
Yes.
Practically every day, probably.
Well, no, it was taken to a farm near Bridgewater.
Ah, I see.
I had never quite known what to do with the cart. Certain amount of ridicule in my family that I'd got a cart before a horse. I was talking with the church warden in Thurloxton, when my mother died, she made a small bequest to Thurloxton with which they built a notice board, and they're now going to refurbish that notice board and wanted to let us as family know. And in that conversation I mentioned the cart, and once you mention it you've got to talk about it, and then I think they became very interested because they are having an armistice exhibition in this November, when of course the cart will be 100 years old, and it is still in exactly the same paintwork and everything which it was delivered all those many years ago.
Not too far away from Porter's Cottage then?
No.
Close to home.
No, it's almost come completely home.
Almost.
After 100 years.
Oh yeah. I'm being nosy now. Yeah, you can sort of see it there.
It'll clean up some more, I reckon. I just wiped that with a cloth.
Have you?
Yeah.
Still just there, isn't it?
If you've got a
It'd be a shame, in some ways, it'd be a shame to paint it.
It would.
Yeah.
That's what I resisted, actually. It's a very strong link to the village as it was in previous years. It is a beautifully made thing, made by an absolute craftsman. Jim Porter was the wheelwright. He built the cart. Walter Winslade was the blacksmith. He made all the ironwork for the cart. And there are descendants of those two families who still live in Somerset, who will, I think, be very interested to see the cart.
Divided into two groups. By far the bigger group is excited by
Yeah.
the other group think we're completely bonkers. Great.
Who cares? Who cares? I think it's great.
The cart is now owned by the village of Thurloxton. I hope that it will have another life. It's too old really to work on a farm again, but I think with some minor restoration its life will be preserved, and it is a real link. I believe that the villagers in Thurloxton are very keen to see it back where it perhaps belonged, and it is an example of the craftsmanship which there was in that village. No, it is tremendous really that the cart is back on its centenary, which is such an evocative centenary. Young men will have gone from the village. Many of them won't have come back. It is a time that we can remember, and it is good that we can actually look at artefacts of the day which they will have known, and it adds to one's memory and the commemoration of all that happened in those years.